Greetings, fellow traveler. Tired of the hardships of your journey? Here, take a seat by the fire and let me spin you a grim tale of a dark future where there is only war. Today, I bring you the tale of the various different Aeldari Subfactions. Since we've already covered the Eldar lore in one of our previous encounters, I can assume you have the necessary knowledge for today's tale. If not, you can always go and check out the previous video on the fall of the Eldar Empire to get up to speed. As I mentioned in our last encounter, the Eldar were divided after the fall into different groups that act of their own volition. I've already spoken of the two main factions, the Craftworld Eldar and the Dark Eldar, so today I'll tell you of the other minor factions such as the Exodites, the Corsairs, the Harlequins and the Ynnari. Although these minor factions are fewer in number, they are not to be underestimated, for they remain considerable forces to be reckoned with. So, without further ado, let's dive into the lore. The Exodites are, in a nutshell, basically Amish Eldar. They were some of the first to foresee the fall and flee from the perversions of their kin, exiling themselves from their empire in a great exodus to settle on distant worlds to live simple lives isolated from temptation. These worlds they settled on are known as Maiden Worlds. Most of them at first were completely barren, but thanks to the Eldar terraforming technology, were converted into lush paradise worlds full of vibrant life. After settling on their new homeworlds, the Exodites set their past, their traditions and their technology aside, becoming one with nature to live a more simple and austere life and try to forget the blood orgies their kin were taking part in. The Exodites first abandoned the Eldar Empire in great colony ships that would take thousands of years to reach their destinations. Some would suffer terrible accidents and be destroyed before arriving. Others would find death at the hands of orcs or other similar threats once they arrived to their destination, finding their new homeworlds already occupied by unfriendly denizens who, let's just say, aren't very keen on sharing. Imagine leaving your life behind, your job, your family, your entire civilization to go live on a paradise world ready to be colonized for a new beginning, and find out it's been infested by greenskins that charge towards your ship when you've just landed after thousands of years of travel, just to be crumped and stomped on by a horde of screaming greenskin savages. Now that's what I call bad luck. Anyhow, many ships did arrive without a problem and found their new homes ready for the taking. Thousands upon thousands of kilometers of virgin land, full of lush forests, unending plains, great vibrant oceans and all kinds of plants and exotic wildlife. Some of them, or maybe all of them, were even brought by the Eldar colonists, so in many cases the environments of their new homes would be very familiar and perfectly suited for them. To avoid the temptations of self-indulgence and hedonism that led to the downfall of their empire, the Exodites live hard lives of work, sacrifice, and restraint. Unlike other Eldari who continue to rely on advanced technology, the Exodites grow their own food and carry out all kinds of agricultural and animal farming tasks themselves. At first, it did take some getting used to, as the Eldar's slender bodies weren't made for the hardships of physical labor and all the physical work that this kind of life entailed. Conditions that were exacerbated by the wild worlds they inhabited. But after millennia of adaptation, today the Exodites fit perfectly as part of the ecosystem. Their settlements are small and well scattered throughout their territory, and they are too few in number to interfere with the natural balance of their worlds. The Exodites move as nomads through their worlds, migrating from settlement to settlement with the change of the seasons, often leaving settlements completely abandoned until they return at another time of the year. Exodites are particularly renowned for having domesticated quote-unquote dinosaurs that they can even ride like mounts for all kinds of purposes. Apart from using them as livestock, they can also use them as an effective deterrent against those who would try to invade their lands. Although, truth be told, they aren't really dinosaurs per se. Indeed, they are a very similar race of giant reptiles with several subspecies that were probably part of the Eldar homeworld's wildlife, or maybe they were found by a random Eldar colonist/explorer on some planet and they just thought they were too cool to be left alone, and so they exported them throughout the entire Eldar Empire. These fearsome reptiles come in all sorts of sizes, shapes and colours, but are generally quite similar to the dinosaurs that inhabited the Earth, although larger, tougher and fiercer, and for sci-fi purposes have been renamed. For example, although Exodites would refer to these quote-unquote dinosaurs as just dragons collectively, what we would see as an Allosaurus, let's say, in 40k terms is known as a Megalodon. Despite being few in number, Exodites are fierce warriors who have no mercy when it comes to defending their world against any fool who dares to set foot on their territory. There are examples in the lore in which a single Exodite world managed to repel almost effortlessly the incursion of 4 Dark Eldar cabals. And during the Great Crusade, it took no less than the combined efforts of 3 Space Marine legions to subjugate a single Exodite world: the Salamanders, the Iron Hands, and the Death Guard, led by Primarchs Vulcan, Ferrus Manus, and Mortarion. And even with such a display of brute force, they still had a pretty bad time conquering the planet. So why are Exodite worlds so goddamn difficult to conquer? Well, the main reason is that any Exodite world upon being invaded just goes full Jumanji mode when under attack. Or well, more like a fusion between Jumanji and King Kong Island, but if all the plants and dinosaurs had based their diet solely on steroids and cocaine. Which, well, imagine jungles with all kinds of carnivorous and or poisonous plants that have evolved to kill, giant vines that wrap you in their roots, sections of the forest that move to isolate or hinder your army, plus all kinds of hostile weather changes created by the psychic powers of the Exodites, not to mention rampaging killer dinosaurs that can reach the size of a house that run towards you in the biggest stampede you've ever seen in your life, some mounted by highly aggressive skilled Exodite warriors wielding spears. Some Exodites even rise literal dragons, yes, you heard me right, flying giant lizards, or carnosaurs, which are basically 40k T-Rexes. And if that weren't enough, some of these exotic pets are even equipped with shuriken cannons or other Eldar weaponry mounted on their backs to add some firepower to the fearsome melee capabilities of these beasts. So yeah, invading these worlds isn't a very good idea if you don't want to turn into a pile of dino dung, because essentially the planet can kind of defend itself while the Exodites carry out hit and run tactics, sometimes even guiding the most lethal animals with their psychic powers to engage the enemy's positions. Exodites still retain some of their technology such as spirit stones, wraithbone and shuriken weaponry, although they also exploit many natural resources which they use as building materials, and they usually dress in the scaled hides and skins of their dinosaurs. To protect their souls after death from she who thirsts, apart from using spirit stones, Exodites use something very similar to the infinity circuit of craft worlds. Once an Exodite dies and their soul is stored in their spirit stone, it can merge with an artifact known as a rolled spirit, which is a large psychic matrix that is connected to all regions of the planet, and, like the infinity circuit, acts as a kind of artificial afterlife where the souls of the dead can rest. In this way, the souls of the Exodites are protected from Slaanesh after death, unless they were to leave their homeworld and die, which they don't really do anyways for obvious reasons. The Maiden Worlds near the heart of the Eldar Empire were destroyed with the Fall. However, some of them, being far away enough from the Empire, were immune to the psychic implosion caused by the birth of Slaanesh, and through living lives of hard work, sacrifice and restraint, the Exodites have eluded the corruption that permeated their empire, and, unlike Craftworld Eldar, don't need to follow the paths to control their emotions. Their lifestyle hasn't changed much since their original arrival to their Maiden Worlds. They continue to train and use their psychic powers, which are now more powerful and direct, but despite having more innate psychic strength, they lack the subtlety of their Craftworld kin, and therefore aren't as effective as them. Another similarity they share with the Craftworld Eldar is that they're usually led by seers and follow their prophetic visions. Craftworld Eldar usually describe the Exodites as a rustic and simple people, tending to be more vigorous and resilient than standard Eldar because of their hard lives. Despite being more primitive and considered by many to be mere farmers, the Exodites have survived until now perfectly well, and if no one happens upon their worlds, they will probably carry on living their quiet, nature-loving lives. Also known as the Anrathane, the Corsairs, as their name implies, are basically pirate eldars who travel in fleets of nomadic pirates. They're comprised mostly by young Aeldari who've abandoned their craft world, although they can also be Drukhari who've left Commorragh to live free lives sailing the stars far from authorities who tell them what to do. Eldar Corsairs are considered a mix of both major factions, hedonistic pirates who pursue their passions but not complete psychopaths, and it should be noted that like Craftworld Eldar, they use spirit stones and psychic powers. Living pirate lives, it's easy for Corsairs to give in to their desires and succumb to the pleasures of battle and slaughter and end up being consumed by Slaanesh or becoming a Dark Eldar. However, most Corsairs will eventually mature out of this phase of rebellious youth and return to their craft worlds. Only those Aeldari of iron will are able to indulge in their passions without being consumed by them and become a true Corsair. And let's say that true Corsairs can be pretty prone to mood swings, behaving in a benevolent or a very cruel way at the snap of a finger. They could either treat you to a great feast with all kinds of luxury or exotic delicacies, or on the other hand they could skin you alive and drink a cup of your blood while watching how you suffer, all depending on how they woke up that morning. It's said that Eldar Corsairs of all their kin are the most similar to the original Eldar before the fall, free from the limitations of the path system to explore the sensations that life offers without restrictions and without succumbing to excess. However, not having an infrastructure that gives them resources like the craft worlds or the cabals, Corsairs are forced to practice piracy, attacking ships or settlements of other races continuously to resupply. Well, I say other races, but let's be honest, they usually attack freighters, transports, or small fleets of the Imperium of Man. Another reason why humans have learned to hate these goddamn knife-eared Xenos so much. Being few in number, they're not very fond of big confrontations or risk fighting in big battles they could lose. In other words, Corsairs are pure opportunists. Some Corsair fleets come to trade and ally with the Exodites, providing orbital defense when their world is threatened, and therefore the Corsairs are the faction that has more dealings with their Amish cousins. Corsair fleets are usually led by Corsair princes. These are powerful individuals that are usually obsessed with something very particular, be it satisfying their hedonistic desires, their eternal bloodlust, the search of exotic technologies or elixirs that bestow immortality, or gaining power through arcane sorcery. Sometimes Corsair princes will sell their mercenary services to the highest bidder, be it other Eldar or even rebel Imperials that have become so desperate to seek the aid of Xenos. Beneath the princes, Corsair barons also hold great power, leading groups known as courtiers. The Corsair faction is also quite prone to infighting, since each Corsair harbours the ambition to become prince and won't let anything or anyone come in their way. All in all, despite being a small faction, Corsairs have become a recurring nuisance to the Imperium of Man, raiding, pillaging and plundering settlements, and getting out of dodge before Imperial reinforcements can arrive to hunt them down, retreating to their hideouts until their resources are low and they're forced to carry out another raid. The Harlequins, or quote-unquote space clowns, are the followers of the laughing god Kegorak. During the fall, the Harlequins fled with the laughing god to the depths of the webway, and they've dwelt there ever since. Harlequins are entirely devoted to the laughing god and have become highly skilled warrior dancers who live in the infinite labyrinthine paths of the webway, and it's said that they are the only ones who know all its myriad paths. Harlequins are also the self-proclaimed guardians of Aeldari history and mythology that they share with all other Eldar factions when they visit them through complicated dances and performances. These performances have highly complicated plots and contain all sorts of acrobatic choreography, elaborate costumes, scenery and dramatic effects, which are all enhanced through psychic powers and psychedelic drugs that contribute to make it more of a spiritual experience for the audience. One of their most famous performances, for example, is that of The Fall, serving as an elegy and a warning to all of their kind. So maybe actually the term play or performance doesn't really do justice to Harlequin performances. Or, well, I'm not sure what kind of plays you guys go to, but when I go to the theatre, I don't get handed psychedelics. Aside from being self-proclaimed guardians of history and mythology, Harlequins also protect the Black Library, an immense structure hidden in a secret location of the webway that serves as a repository of the Aeldari's forbidden lore regarding the ruinous powers. Some say it's the size of a craft world, others say it's a craft world of its own right that resides deep within the labyrinthine paths of the webway. Normally, entry is forbidden to any but the Harlequins. However, on some isolated occasions they have allowed entry to various other Eldar or other Xenos, and even humans with whom they collaborate in their fight against the Great Enemy. Although Harlequins are very careful not to admit those who've been corrupted by chaos, and only those who've defeated the chaos that dwells within their hearts may enter. Harlequins are organized in groups called troops. 3 troops forms a mask, and each mask is led by a great Harlequin. Their ultimate goal is to rival and defeat chaos, and to achieve this, they're willing to collaborate with any other faction, both among their kin and any other members of the galaxy, under the typical premise the enemies of my enemies are my friends, which actually makes the Harlequins seem quite sensible and rational compared to all the rest. Harlequins are the only Eldar faction that gets along with all their other kin. They've earned the respect of their various cousins by preserving their common history and traditions, and can move freely on both craft worlds, Exodite worlds, or even through the dark streets of Camorra. And in times of war, as well as fighting independently, they can be seen in the armies of any other Eldar faction. Aside from basically being bard ninja killers, Harlequins serve another couple of functions for the Aeldari race as a whole. Harlequins act as a sort of central authority over all the other Eldar factions. They believe Kegorak has imparted upon them the task of unifying the entire Eldar race to fight against Lanesh, the Necrons, or any other threat against their people. And although the other factions technically don't take orders from the Harlequins, they are both feared and respected, and so, when the Harlequins pay them a visit, every Eldar, be they craft world seers, Exodite farmers, space pirates, or Drukhari psychopaths, they all stop what they're doing and heed their words. In addition, as they get along well with all their cousins, Harlequins also act as a kind of ambassadors for the entire race, travelling to negotiate with other civilizations when necessary, although Harlequins may not share the same sense of diplomacy as the rest, since, on one famous occasion, they intended to take a message to the Emperor of Mankind himself on behalf of Eldrad. And, well, instead of knocking on the door, they sneaked into the palace, killed a few custodies, and almost reached the Golden Throne. And this is no easy task at all. Sneaking into the Imperial Palace of Terra, one of the most well-guarded and most secure places in the goddamn galaxy, and the most sacred place in the entire Imperium, and the Harlequins casually sneak in and kill a few custodies almost effortlessly. And well, to be honest, if they had knocked on the door and asked very nicely if they could see the Emperor, they probably would have got a bolt around to the head anyway. So all in all, maybe this was the best way to send their message. When the custodies finally managed to stop the Harlequins and ask them what the hell they thought they were doing there and why they'd killed their way through the Imperial Palace, the Harlequins just said it was their way of saying hello, a simple diplomatic overture. Which, I mean, if they're supposed to be ambassadors representing the Aeldari as a race, and the first thing they do is kill the people they are going to negotiate with, well, let's just say it's not the very best way to make a first good impression, is it now? Anyway, moving on, Harlequins are by far the most mysterious and cryptic Aeldari faction. For them, there is no distinction between art and war, and at every instant they're performing some part of their complex theatrical plays. This makes talking to them and getting some sense out of what they're saying very complicated indeed, since they're always talking in riddles and verse rich in Eldar symbolism, which incidentally leads to a lot of confusion. Harlequins have mastered their physical skills to such a level that when in combat they move at speeds imperceptible by the human eye. I would even go as far to say that the Harlequins are one of the most agile beings with the fastest reflexes in the entire galaxy. By itself, the agility of a standard Eldar is described as something supernatural compared to humans. They move much faster, and with such fluid movements, it seems that they're not even touching the ground, giving the feeling that they're almost floating in the air and making them very elusive. A common feature for the entire race that humans can easily identify as something alien and unnatural and view with a certain degree of disgust. So let's say if a standard Aeldari can humiliate the best human athletes, to the Eldar, Harlequins are the incarnation of moving fast as fuck. Even the Aeldari fear them and consider them their most agile and lethal warriors, using all kinds of acrobatics, complex choreographies and arts of deception, as well as unique ornate weapons and armor on the battlefield. Witnessing Harlequins fight has to be one of the most sublime experiences in the entire galaxy. Dressed in elegant and exuberant clothing, their faces covered in clown masks with macabre grins and sneers, dancing their dance of death, effortlessly dodging and attacking as if it were all part of an elegant pre-designed choreography, spilling blood as they recite the equivalent to Shakespeare in their Xenos tongue, sowing panic and chaos among the enemy lines. Before moving on to our next sub-faction, since we're talking about Harlequins, we have to mention Harlequin Solitaires. Solitaires are probably one of the most proficient warriors in the entire galaxy. Solitaires are chosen by Kegorak himself to tread upon the path of damnation, for in their performance they will take on the role of Slaanesh, a role that would drive any lesser Harlequin to madness. As a consequence, upon their death their soul is promised to she who thirsts. It's said that Kegorak values Solitaires to such an extent that he will battle Slaanesh for their souls and try to win them back through trickery. Sadly though, he's not always successful. As their name indicates, Solitaires act alone as outsiders among Harlequins, roaming the galaxy in solitude, walking unseen among other races, thanks to being blessed by Kegorak. Despite mostly acting alone, Harlequins may fancy to join a mask on occasions to perform with them or to join them in certain battles. However, Solitaires almost always fight alone. Their dance of death is so perfect they move at blinding speeds as a dazzling blaze of leaping light and colour, spinning, pouncing and dodging bullets and shells with unmatched grace and elegance to later slay their enemies with refined sweeps of their blades. In addition, Solitaires never speak out of their performances, always reciting verses and riddles from one player or another, and it's said that any who accidentally addresses them or touches them is forever cursed. Such is their power and mysterious ways that all other Eldar fear and respect them, even as Drubal Vect, the Dark Lord of Kamora, would think twice before incurring the ire of a Harlequin Solitaire, for only the greatest, bravest, strongest and most incorruptible among Eldar can play the part of Slaanesh and remain sane. All in all, Harlequins are renowned and mysterious warrior dancers, devout followers of the laughing god, the great Harlequin, the first fool. Their devotion and faith towards him is absolute, and his word is unquestionable. Recently, Kegorak's ultimate jest has been revealed to the Harlequin Shadowseers, an intricate galaxy-spanning performance that will somehow trick Slaanesh into expending all her power not to destroy the Aeldari, but to save them. How they will achieve this, however, is not very clear, for the great Harlequin's words are frustratingly vague and ambiguous. In any case, the Harlequins have begun the first steps of this final dance, and will see it to fruition or die trying. The Ynnari are the youngest Aeldari faction, a new faction that emerged after the 13th Black Crusade in the 41st millennium. The Ynnari hope to birth a new Aeldari god, Yniad, the god of the dead. Supposedly, Yniad would be strong enough to defeat Slaanesh and reincarnate the Aeldari she's consumed, bringing their race back from the ashes to a state of glory. Although it's not very clear how they're going to achieve such an impressive feat, since according to the prophecies, Yniad grows a little more each time an Eldar dies and his soul goes to the infinity circuit of their craft world. And so Yniad won't awake completely until all the Aeldari die in the last apocalypse according to Eldar myth, called the Ramadandra. And of course, this prophecy poses a big problem now, doesn't it? Because if your goal is to save all the Eldar, and to do that you have to kill them all, I'm not sure to what extent you're saving them or damning them. Plus, the Eldar prophecies are usually very ambiguous, and it's not entirely guaranteed that Slaanesh will fall when all the Eldar die to complete this prophecy. Another slight problem that comes to mind with this prophecy, off the top of my head, is what do you do with all the Dark Eldar in Commorragh? You'd have to convince them / force them to put on a Spirit Stone and then kill them. And on the one hand, Spirit Stones don't actually work very well for Dark Eldar, and on the other hand, Dark Eldar aren't the most sympathetic or willing to collaborate with their kin, or anyone else in the galaxy for that matter. So good luck with that one, I guess. So to no one's surprise, the Ynnari are looking for a different way to create Ynnari other than through the sacrifice of their entire race. To that end, the Ynnari have begun accepting members from all other factions of their race who want to join their efforts. This new faction has restored hope to many Eldar, and so they've grown rapidly in numbers and popularity. This in turn has made them quite a few enemies among the Aeldari, as Asdrubal Vect for one, and obviously they've attracted the attentions of She Who Thirsts, who's began sending hordes of her demons to hunt them down. The Ynnari are led by the mysterious Aeldari named Yvraine, a former slave who managed to free herself from the combat arenas of Commorragh, which in itself is quite a remarkable feat. And how did she manage to pull that off, you might ask? Well, apparently she has a fragment of Ynnari embedded in her mind, and Ynnari helps her out with all kinds of tips and divine powers, including raising the dead, quite literally, and not in a zombie kind of way, but restoring the dead to life, or even plucking a soul from the warp of someone who's been dead for thousands of years, and bang, now suddenly they're reborn through the power of Ynnari. She even helped to cure Reboot Gilliman in this way, returning the Primarch of the Ultramarines to the Imperium of Mankind. And also, probably more impressively, she managed to restore some Rubric Marines to flesh and bone, a feat that not even Araman could accomplish, and left him completely astounded. How this necromancer, Yvraine, can survive or not go entirely mad with a fragment of a warp entity embedded in her brain escapes my understanding. But hey, she's an incredibly skilled fighter with divine-like powers, and she's turning into a beacon of hope amongst the Aeldari. It's said that the Ynnari have the ability to communicate more effectively with the souls of the dead Aeldari residing in Spirit Stones that can also even help them sometimes on the battlefield. This new and fascinating faction brings new and interesting options for the development of the Aeldari, and if everything goes according to plan, they could even slay or defeat Slaanesh and return the Aeldari to their former glory. Although, personally, I don't think Games Workshop will decide to kill off a Chaos God just like that, and honestly I hope they don't, because that would be a sign that they're going to close a narrative with some kind of end times-like apocalypse. But maybe it could go down like an Age of Sigmar, where Slaanesh throws up all the souls of the Eldar she's consumed, and the Eldar manage to imprison her somehow. Although that would just be copying a page from the book of Age of Sigmar into 40k, so I hope they come up with a different story to make it more interesting. In any case, the Ynnari have come up with a different way of awakening Ynnari that doesn't involve driving their own race to extinction. According to Eldar legends, if the 5 Crone Swords of Morai Heg are collected, they will grant their wielder dominion over life and death. Yvraine believes that if she were to collect all 5 of these Crone Swords, she would have enough power to finally awaken Ynnari. So far, she's gathered 4 out of the 5 Crone Swords. However, the 5th Crone Sword lies within the palace of Slaanesh itself, making any attempt to recover it seemingly impossible. Will the Ynnari finally achieve their goal and awaken Ynnari so the god of death may finally slay Slaanesh in a final battle for the Eldar's souls? Or will the Ynnari fail to achieve this seemingly impossible task or die trying? Only time will tell. Well, there you have it, the different Aeldari subfactions. The Exodites and Corsairs don't really have much more lore to it, but the Ynnari and the Harlequins may get their own videos sometime in the future. Surely there is much more we can talk about in other videos about these knife-eared Xenos, like for example the Craft Worlds, the Dark City of Camorra, or as drew by Elvect and his rise to power, but for the time being I'm gonna consider all Eldar factions covered, albeit in a general fashion. Anyway, that's all from me for now. If you liked the video, you know the drill. Give a like and subscribe for more content. Thanks for watching, and hopefully we'll meet again in the next video.